I'm Thompson. I work for a company called Global Data Sentinel. We're a data security, cyber security solutions and service provider. We've got offices in New York and Newcastle. The customers, healthcare providers, defense contractors, financial and government agencies, North America, Europe, UK. We build solutions. Data can be stored either on-premise, in the cloud, in our own secure private cloud, or any other combination, basically wherever the customer wants the data to be. We use OVH, we also use AWS, Azure, OpenStack. I'm going to talk today about OVH just because it's an option most people haven't heard of. And we do a lot of data classification. GDPR is a great thing as far as we're concerned. It's perfect for our solutions. I don't work for OVH, by the way. The company doesn't endorse OVH. I'm not being paid. This isn't a sales pitch or anything like that. But please do take a bag from OVH. They've sent some goodies, and I've got some nice goodies to give away as well. Shout and ask questions. There's freebies. Quick straw poll. Who uses AWS? Who uses Azure? Most. Who uses OVH? Oh, one.
Yeah, not commercially, just myself. Yeah.
That's how I started. And who's heard of OVH before me? It's one more than I usually get, actually. Interesting. Okay, great. What I'm going to cover today, who are OVH, what they do, and why most people don't seem to have heard of them. We'll talk about their pricing. I'm not going to direct comparison to anybody else, but I think their pricing looks good. I'll show you how we go about setting up a HyperV host. We'll talk about VLANs, load balancers and stuff like that, object storage, and then just a bit more about the API. The OVH API is great. It's all REST-based. You can automate everything from buying hardware to paying bills to buying an IP address, setting up firewalls. It's really nice. Okay, who are OVH? For somebody nobody's heard of, they're not small. Over 1 million physical servers, 1.3 million customers, 27 data centers worldwide. They've got more opening all the time, so put +1 in 2018. They are massively expanding. What's interesting is the number of data centers they've got around Europe. They've got one open at USA, East Coast open, West Coast is imminent. We've got one in London and another one in the UK opening. I think it's this, well, it's certainly this year sometime, but I think it's in the next few months. And with everything with OVH, you choose which data center you want to put it in, which again, it's quite nice when you start worrying about things like redundancy, high availability, that sort of thing. What can you do with them? Typical example setups, the sort of thing that we might build for a customer. So end users, you can use an OVH firewall, OVH load balancers. You can then put various hardware in different data centers. What's interesting is they also provide a private VLAN between all of your servers and all of their data centers. So you get your own private networking. So any physical hardware service you buy have 2 network cards in them. One can be facing the internet and one can be your private network, which is great for data synchronization. That's the things you wouldn't want to be pushing over the internet. Object storage, it's a lot like Azure and AWS. We'll talk a bit more about that later. And then they also offer something called OVH Connect, which is basically you can connect your leased line into their data center if you want, which really does blur the line between your data center, theirs, and where your gear is. Interesting so far? Show me the money example pricing. But these aren't virtual instances, these are actual dedicated. So for a piece of hardware, 4 cores are on 16 gig of RAM, So You Start. One brief thing about So You Start. So You Start is OVH's kind of startup wing. It looks like a separate company, it's really OVH, and they don't deny that. But you can get, if you want some hardware to play with privately, it's a very, very cheap way of getting some dedicated hardware you can play with. It's internet facing, still same quality, same data centers, everything like that. But £28 a month. For your own hardware, you can virtualize, that'll run HyperV quite nicely. Obviously, you're limited by RAM, but it's a good starting point to play with. Up to, well, dedicated server, 6 cores, 128 gig RAM, £124 a month. And that includes a 250 meg, off the top of my head anyway, connection to the internet and unlimited traffic. So if you're paying that, that's all you'd be paying. Same with the top one as well, mind you, per month. A cloud instance, so now we're talking virtual instances, more like your traditional Azure and AWS instances, from £3.50 a month up to, and just having a play something silly, 120 gig RAM, 32 virtual cores, £310 a month or 86 pence an hour. So you can get some really, really powerful instances if that's what you want, and pay for them by the hour if you so choose. Object storage, less than a penny a gig per month basically. And you don't, like AWS and Azure, you don't pay to put data in just for taking it out and then ongoing storage. Does that make sense? An IP address. We keep hearing IP addresses are running out, and OVH charges a one-off fee of £1.27 or something, £1 or £1.69. That's a one-off fee. I don't know how they've got so many, but they do. And if you have a dedicated server, they'll sell you blocks of them as well. So if you want a 32 block, 64, they will sell you blocks at that price. Up to hardware firewall, it's free. So if you want to use the OVH firewall, as long as you've got one of their public IP addresses, they'll throw it in for free. Again, it's all configurable via their API as well. OVH, did anybody hear about the massive denial of service attacks that have been going on recently? Something like over 1.3 terabytes a second. That was pointed at OVH and they survived it. It was really impressive. We saw some of our OVH services saw slight slowdown in service, but they were open the whole time you could access them. We thought that was really impressive. Load balancer, again, REST API, but £16 a month, and that's, again, offering things like geolocation, pick a data center you want to put it in and balance between different locations. Sort of thing that I'm guessing most of us here are doing. Is that fair? Okay, let's build our own Hyper-V host. So steps if you want to get started. Again, if you go on the dedicated hardware route, well, actually, this talk, we're going to build our own mini little data center. We're going to buy a dedicated server. We're going to set up Hyper-V Core. Has anybody used Hyper-V Core? Couple. On OVH?
No.
Right, okay. You can, it works really well. So yeah, free operating system from Microsoft, but it's intended for hosting Hyper-V machines. Again, you can keep your costs to a minimum. It's very like, has anybody used Windows Core? Nope. Again, no user interface, all command line. It shrinks the footprint massively. So we're going to do that. We're going to get stuff on. We're going to install FileZilla Manager. We'll talk a bit about that. And we're going to set up some virtual network cards. There's a couple of gotchas with virtual networks, mainly because this is remote, in the sense that if you get it wrong, you disable the network on your server and it's quite difficult to get it back without starting again. I had a few sleepless nights the first time I was setting this up with, and back to the beginning, we'll start installing Windows again. And remember to configure your firewall. It's free, use it, it will protect your servers. So again, more pricing, the sort of pricing we're talking about, £28, £124. If you want something huge, I've never ordered one of the bottom ones, but it looks really interesting. 20 core, 40 virtual core, £590 a month with 256 gig of RAM. That'd be quite nice. That'd be quite a nice Hyper-V host. I'll now play my first video. So we're in the OVH control panel. And I've ordered the server. This is what you get when you first install it. So it shows you the data center it's in. It's got bits and pieces of monitoring. It's currently using a rescue operating system. So we're going to go ahead and install an operating system on it. And there's a huge list of operating systems to choose from. You can install any Windows Server operating system. Obviously, you need your own license key. We're going to go with HyperV Server. And it'll let me configure some bits and pieces so I can play around with the partitions and whatnot. Give it an installation script. SPLA license, give it your own Windows license. We don't need one because we're going to use Hyper-V Core. That'll go. And off it goes. Oh. So it's installing Windows at this point. We're not going to sit and watch it install Windows, that's okay. It's pre-recorded. But, any questions so far? Is this interesting? Bear in mind that you'd be going through exactly the same thing if you'd bought the £28 a month piece of hardware. And that's how I started with OVH, actually just one of those, and can use it. You can get 5, happily 3 gig virtual machines off that for £28 for each 3 gig, but running Windows, and it runs quite nicely. Okay, so now we've got, now we've got a Hyper-V host. If you log into it via RDP, you get that. So no real user interface to speak of. We need to get some stuff on it. It's such a basic operating system. And it's also remote. Has anybody used chocolatey.org? Usually get very mixed feelings. Some people love it, some people hate it. It has a purpose in the world. It could be a lot nicer, but it works. Chocolatey is, think NuGet for installing applications. So you can run that top bit of PowerShell and it installs Chocolatey on the operating system. And then I can just run those Choco install and then whatever you want to install. So put Google Chrome on it, FileZilla Server on it, and Explorer++, for example. It takes a lot of the pain away from the command line. So I'm pointing at the TV. Next up, so now I've got FileZilla Server on. Has anybody used FileZilla Server? A couple of nods. Everybody familiar with FTP though? Yeah. It's a way of copying files onto a remote box. We can set it up, we can use FileZilla, we can generate an SSL certificate, we can securely transfer stuff up to it, because at this point, it's isolated. If it's your 3rd, 4th, 5th box, you can have a VLAN, you can have an IPsec tunnel back to your office, you can have all sorts of options. First one, you just need to get stuff on there. FTP-S is a good way of doing it. Once you've got your stuff on there, how many people use Hyper-V? A few. Do you use anything other than, well, the RSAT tool, so HyperV Manager to do it? That's built into Windows. This box won't have that on if you've installed Hyper-V Core. So you can either be, well, better than me at PowerShell, or you can put something on. 2 options. FileZilla Manager is a really good Hyper-V manager app that you can put on a remote box. They do have a free version, which is fully functional. It just limits the number of VMs you can run on it. And a new one, Project Honolulu. That's from Microsoft. That's completely free. It's all on the web. It's only a 30 meg install. It runs nicely on Hyper-V Core. I think that's going to be amazing when it's finished. It's still quite slow at the minute, I found when I was using it. But 2 different options to manage your Hyper-V box. And obviously they'll both work on a full UI Windows install if you want it as well. Before I mentioned it was very easy to, well, break your box, lose network connectivity to it. After many sleepless nights, there is a way of doing it. So what we need to do is, in Hyper-V, you'll set up your virtual networks. And you'll want a public one, obviously. If you do that in FileZilla Manager, what it actually does is it disconnects the network card and then reconnects it to the Hyper-V one. So you'll see a new in Windows, you'll see a new network card appear. It stops if you lose your RDP session when you do that. So it disconnects the network card and then stops. Yeah, that's not good. In the end, after lots of fiddling, that PowerShell, if anybody wants to shout after this, by the way, send me a tweet, whatever. I'm more than happy to share it. It's on my blog as well. But if you run that PowerShell, you lose network connectivity, but every time I've tried it, it has come back after a minute with all the network connections, with an external one, a private one, and an internal one set up. And I've done that a few dozen times now, and every time the box has come back. Worst case, you get it wrong though. You can just go back to the start and start reinstalling Windows again, so OVH will get your box back. Okay, the OVH Firewall. I mentioned that there's a free firewall they'll offer. Via the control panel, it looks something like this. So we turn it on, and then we can build, I think it's up to 18 rules you can have on your firewall per IP address. So we're going to do, first of all, I believe we're going to allow outgoing traffic. Refuse, sorry, default rule. So if no other rule applies, block it, which is a good safety net. Next, we're going to authorize TCP/IP and established. The connection appears established if it's going outgoing. It's just another quirk we learned when we started setting these up. So what I've said there is allow all outgoing traffic. Obviously, you can configure this to say only allow HTTPS or whatever traffic suits your needs. We're allowing 443 in because we like SSL. It's also worth mentioning is, remember that this applies to all of your VMs. So if you set this HyperV host up, you set up your VMs, which I'm guessing you can all do. You can then go and buy an IP address or however many you want and set this up for each one so that each of your VMs can have as many IP addresses as you want and can have their own different firewall rules for each VM running on each HyperV host. So HyperV host, you would probably just lock it down completely, to be honest. So here we've allowed RDP in, we've allowed 443, probably wouldn't allow RDP in the real world. But you can see you can build up your rules. It is time consuming doing this by hand, especially if you've got 64 IP addresses to set up. It will take a long time. That's where the REST API comes in, because we can automate all of this. Okay, so we've got a block of code. What I'll do is I will show you the actual, did everybody use Fiddler tool? Yeah. Lets you see exactly what's going on in an HTTP request. So we're going to send to /dedicated/server, which will list all of the dedicated servers that we own. We're then going to call /dedicated/server/ the server name /IPs, which will list all of the IP addresses associated with that server. So if we just run that, we've got the first one. So you can see it gives you the server name. It ends in EU, which means it's in Europe. There's the IP address for it. And we'll go through again. We've got another IP address. It's that simple. I'm going to bring up Fiddler tool in a minute, I believe. There we go. So you can see there we've made a call to, this one went in via this, so you start API. So you can see dedicated/server. We did a post of that. And then we've got a nice block of JSON which listed the server name. That sounds reasonably easy to everybody. We use Newtonsoft for serialization because it's easy. And there you can see it's listed all of the IP addresses in a nicely parsable JSON blob. Okay, so VRAC. I've mentioned VLANs. VRAC is free as well with OVH. So if you end up with multiple boxes, you can connect them together and it runs between all of their data centers, at least most of them, certainly the ones that we use. So I can have a bunch of servers in the UK, I can have a bunch of servers in Paris, Montreal, which are the data center I want, and create a VRAC, which is basically a VLAN between them, with a private network address, say 10 dot range, something like that. So you can have your nice internet-facing stuff firewall to death, block RDP, block everything, so you've just got the ports open that you need for your customers, and you can have a nice private network between all of them, potentially all the way back into your own office as well if you went with the connect option. Or you could just have an IPsec tunnel or VPN or anything else you wanted into it. But you end up with a nice private network for synchronizing if you do anything like SQL Server clustering, something like that. Okay, on to object storage. How many of you have used some sort of object storage before? A few. Have any of you used OpenStack? OVH uses OpenStack as the back end, so you can just start using this. Within their control panel, so I can choose where I want to, if I'm going to create a container, so a container, think of it as a bucket, somewhere I'm going to store these objects. I can choose which data center. We've got 3 types of container as well. We've got static hosting. In other words, if you want to put HTML, JavaScript, whatever up there, it's open to the whole world. It's totally insecure, anybody can read it. Private, polar opposite, only you can access it. And then public is, it's not available like as a URL, so it's static hosting, but it is a container that if you give somebody the appropriate link, they could access. And cold storage, I forget how much that is, but it's a fraction of the price again for object storage. So if you've got terabytes or petabytes you just want to put somewhere, cold storage is quite a cheap option. And it's about a 4-hour window to get it back up to, I think. So if you say you want to get something out of cold storage, you say I want it back now, and they have to unfreeze it effectively. And that could be as much as a few minutes or as much as 4 hours to get your data back. So it's not where you want to put live services, but backups and things, it's ideal. We are going to put an object up and then get it back. So we've got bits and pieces, application key, application secret, again, just created when you create that container you saw before. Oh yeah, is this going to show you? Something very cool I noticed in the headers. They send an ex-recruitment header. If you can't read it, you know how to code. This is a good start, but it may not be enough. We're looking for engineers. Yeah, I really, really like that. In short, geeks, eager to learn, obstinate. Oop. Nothing like embedding a recruitment advert in your headers. I think that's great. I really liked that when I found it. Right, so you see here, I've got a block of JSON back saying we've stored 0 bytes in this instance. So in our little code example, we're going to add a file to object storage. Nothing shown in the console app, but we'll jump across the Fiddler tool to see what it's actually done. So I had a text file. In the text file is just hello world, by the way. So you can see here, we get a block of JSON back. Oh, we're listing the endpoint. So again, you've got it's offering a different endpoint for each of the France data senders. And there's my put. So I've said put, example1.text, and it's return. Oh, and hello world was the content, and it's given me a 201 back saying yes, it's been stored. So there's now a file in object storage called example1.text. The contents is hello world. And that's exactly the same if you put it into cold storage, static hosting, public or private. It's that easy. I'm guessing that reflects your experiences with OpenStack. And then to get it back, we just do a GET request, giving it the parameters. There's our hello world content back. Could also be a byte stream you write to a file or something. We have tested this with big files, several gigabytes have put up and down, so big, in fact VHDs we've put up and down. So I've done a get, passing in example1.text, we've got it back. See the XORth token? There's a little bit of maths basically using your secret key to actually come up with a token using the time. I'll share that with anybody who's interested, but again, that's just how you're authenticating each of your requests with Ovh. And it's just a header I apply. It's a slightly different URL for each data center and each region. You know, I said they had 27 data centers. Ovh started off in France, so they've got several data centers around France. So you can just tweak the URL to give it a slightly different region as you put things up. This code, the only reference is Newtonsoft for JSON serialization. Everything else is just using HTTP web request, real easy stuff. Makes sense? Anybody interested in giving that a go or anything like that? Not now, by the way. Okay, so the API, we've seen a couple of examples. I'll just give you an overview of some of the other stuff you can do. Literally everything OVH can do. It calls their own API, so you can buy hardware, you can buy virtual instances, you can buy IP addresses, you can set up the firewall, you can set up load balancers. It's all really easy using the REST API. And install an operating system. We don't do that very often. It feels dangerous. I've never tried doing that via the API, but I can see the calls are in there. So one thing they have for their API is a web console where you can explore. So you can log in, it will give you a token, and you can just try making the calls yourself, which saves a lot of development time. So you've got things like authenticate, dedicated NAS, so again, they'll give you network attached storage. I've not used that personally, but all that kind of thing. I haven't pressed play. That's better. So it shows you, for each option, we can do a post, and it'll show you what you have to send and the sort of JSON you're going to get back. It also gives you a PHP for some reason, but your .NET won't go into that. They have specialist firewalls for game servers. Not played with them more beyond that, but if anybody's into that sort of thing, apparently their game servers are fantastic. IP, they'll do reverse lookup of an IP address as well, if that's important for any of you. IP load balancing. The load balancers have come on a lot recently. That was quite a long learning curve, but they seem to have improved a lot on that. So you can have whatever sort of servers you want, mail, web, whatever, and in different data centers locations, and have a load balancer in front of them. And it just deals with failover, the farm expanding, contracting, whatever you need like that, which makes upgrades a lot easier. Out of interest, what do you do when you need to push a new version of your software out? So you've built your nice ASP.NET service, you've published on the servers. What happens when you're upgrading them?
I just update Docker image.
The Docker image. Okay, for your Docker, yes, you've got a good answer, because you can just roll over to the new version of it, yes. With the load balancers, you can take a server out the load balancing farm while you do maintenance on it, upgrades, whatever. We can get an IP address, we can buy an IP address, we can then decide what we want to do with it. So you buy an IP address, you assign it to a server, which can also be a virtual machine, as I've mentioned. You can give it a reverse DNS lookup. You can buy licenses, so you can rent per month Windows Server licenses through OVH, if you don't have them, obviously. You can put items in your cart, so if you're going around the website, you can even automate that. You can build your own web front end and take orders that you just process through OVH. I don't know if you're allowed to do that, by the way, but you could using the API. Everything, the API covers everything that I've ever managed to do with OVH. You could do in the API. Thank you.